Ethan walked into the grand court with nervous steps. The floor was polished like glass, and the tall walls shined with banners of the Queen. He had never been this close to royalty before. Soldiers stood on both sides, watching every move he made. His heart beat faster as he tried to keep his posture straight. Today he was to meet Princess Claire, the daughter of the Queen and the leader of the royal armies. Everyone spoke of her as strict, cold, and untouchable. Ethan had no plan to stand out. He only wanted to do his duty as a soldier. The guards opened the door to the throne room. Light spilled through the large windows, falling on the throne where the Queen sat. At her side stood Claire, dressed in a uniform with golden marks of command. She was tall, calm, and her eyes were sharp like steel. Ethan bowed low, his mind filled with the fear of making a mistake. He raised his head, and their eyes met. In that moment, he felt something he could not explain. Without thinking, the words slipped from his lips. "You're adorable." The room froze. Every soldier stiffened. The Queen raised her eyebrows. Claire did not move, but her eyes widened slightly. Ethan realized what he had said, and his stomach twisted. He had spoken without control, and now he was sure his career, maybe even his life, was over. The silence stretched long, and Ethan wished he could vanish into the floor. But Claire only stared at him. Her face did not change. She simply kept her eyes on him, watching. The Queen dismissed the gathering soon after, but Ethan felt the weight of what had happened. When he left the throne room, soldiers whispered around him. Some laughed under their breath. Others shook their heads. Ethan walked quickly back to the barracks, his thoughts spinning. Why had he said that? Why had those words escaped him in front of the court? He had no answer, only knew that the princess now looked at him in a way that made him uneasy. The next day, Ethan tried to bury himself in training. He swung his blade, sparred with other soldiers, and pushed himself to sweat. Yet every time he paused, he felt eyes on him. When he turned, he saw Claire standing at the edge of the training field, watching silently. She did not speak. She did not move closer. She only looked at him as if studying every detail of what he did. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He tried to ignore it, but her gaze stayed with him. In the dining hall, it was the same. Ethan sat with his fellow soldiers, eating in silence. When he glanced across the room, Claire was there again. Ash. She sat at a separate table, her plate untouched, her eyes fixed on him. The men around Ethan noticed it too, whispering about how the princess had never given attention to any soldier before. Ethan lowered his head, feeling his ears burn. He ate quickly and left, but her stare followed him even as he walked out. Days passed, and it became clear this was no accident. Wherever Ethan went, Claire appeared. In the corridors, near the armory, even outside the barracks late at night, she was there. Always watching, always silent. Ethan tried to focus on his duties, but he could not shake the strange feeling. Was she angry? Was she planning to punish him for his careless words? Or was it something else he could not understand? The thought of facing her made him restless. Yet a small part of him wondered why she had not scolded or shamed him. One evening, while cleaning his armor, Ethan thought back to the moment in the throne room. The way her eyes had widened, the way she had stayed silent, the way she kept following him with her stare. He knew he had spoken the truth without meaning to. He had called her adorable because, for a moment, he had seen her not as a general or a princess, but as a person. And somehow that truth had changed everything. The court whispered about the strange link between the princess and the young soldier. But Ethan said nothing. He kept his head low, waiting for the day Claire would finally speak to him. Until then, he carried the weight of her eyes wherever he went. Not knowing if it was a curse or the start of something far greater, Ethan woke early, hoping to escape the strange feeling of being watched. He dressed in his uniform, strapped his sword to his side, and stepped into the morning air. The camp was quiet, but he felt the same heavy presence he had felt for days. When he turned his head, his heart jumped. Princess Claire was standing not far away, her hands behind her back, her eyes fixed on him. She did not speak. She simply stood there, calm and steady, as if she had been waiting for him to appear. Ethan bowed quickly and hurried off to the training grounds, but even as he walked away, he knew she was still watching. Training was no escape. While Ethan sparred with fellow soldiers, he caught sight of her at the edge of the field. Her golden marks of command shined in the sun, her posture straight and proud. Every time he struck or defended, she followed his movements with care. Other soldiers began to notice, whispering to one another. They had never seen the princess pay attention to anyone like this. Some laughed quietly, others shook their heads, but none dared to speak openly. Ethan tried to block it out, but the weight of her gaze grew heavier each day. At meals, it was the same. Ethan sat with his group, eating in silence, but when he looked across the hall, there she was. Claire sat at a table with other officers, yet her eyes were not on them. They were on him. Soldiers near Ethan nudged one another, whispering with wide eyes. "She's staring again," one of them murmured. Ethan lowered his head, but his ears grew hot, ate quickly, but when he left the hall, he saw her rise from her seat as well. She followed him at a distance, never saying a word. By the third day, the whispers had turned into rumors. Some soldiers believed Ethan had insulted the princess and she was waiting for the right moment to punish him. Others believed she had found something special in him and was too proud to say it aloud. Ethan did not know what to believe. He only knew that he could not escape her eyes. At night, when he lay in his bunk, he thought about her sharp gaze. He wondered what she was thinking, why she never spoke, and why she never looked at anyone else the way she looked at him. One evening, after hours of drills, Ethan sat outside the barracks to catch his breath. The sky was dark, stars stretching across the horizon. He heard footsteps, steady and certain. When he turned, his chest tightened. Claire was there again. She stood only a few steps away, her eyes fixed on him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Ethan wanted to say something, but his words caught in his throat. He lowered his eyes, unsure if he should bow or leave. But Claire did not move closer, nor did she leave. She simply remained there, her gaze never shifting. The next morning, Ethan decided to speak to his friend Daniel, another soldier he trusted. Daniel was older, steady, and always calm in his advice. Ethan told him everything, from the slip of words in the throne room to the days of silence and staring. Daniel listened quietly, then gave a slow nod. "She is not like others, Ethan. She is a princess and a general. People fear her. You did something no one else ever dared to do. You spoke to her like she was human. Maybe that is why she looks at you? Maybe she is trying to understand you?" Ethan frowned at his friend's words. Could it be true? Could it be that his careless slip had shown her something no one else dared? He shook his head, unsure. Still, Daniel's words stayed with him through the day. Each time he saw Claire's eyes on him, he remembered what his friend had said. Maybe she was not angry. Maybe she was not planning punishment. Maybe she was only curious. That night, Ethan walked alone near the edge of the camp. The air was cool, and the world around him was silent. He heard the sound of boots on the ground behind him. He did not need to turn to know who it was. He stopped, took a deep breath, and slowly turned to face her. Claire stood only a few steps away, her eyes locked on his. This time, Ethan did not look down. He held her gaze, his chest tight, his mind filled with questions he could not yet ask. The silence between them was strong, but something within it felt different now. For the first time, Ethan felt that her eyes were not only watching, they were waiting. The calm of the kingdom did not last. One morning, horns sounded through the camp and soldiers rushed to their posts. A message had arrived from the borders. Rival forces from another colony were moving against the Queen's lands. Their numbers were strong and they were already marching closer. The court ordered the armies to prepare at once. Ethan felt the weight of fear as he tightened his armor and checked his sword. For years he had trained for moments like this, but he had never faced a true war.
Ow.
Now the chance had come, and he wondered if he was ready. Princess Claire was at the front of the preparations. She stood tall, giving orders with a clear voice. Her eyes burned with focus, and the soldiers followed her without question. Ethan watched her move through the lines, her presence both sharp and steady. He felt again that strange pull, the same one that had started with his careless words. She did not look at him this time, but he could feel her command like a fire. She was no longer only a princess in his eyes. She was a leader who carried the strength of the entire kingdom. The armies marched to the outer fields where the rival forces gathered. Dust rose into the sky as thousands of boots struck the ground. Ethan stayed close to his unit, but his eyes often shifted to where Claire rode at the head of the army. She carried no crown, only her uniform and her sword. Fear gave way to instinct. He blocked, struck, and pushed forward. The noise was thunder in his ears, but through it he heard the voice of Claire calling orders. She moved across the field like a force of nature, steadying the lines, turning chaos into order. Ethan had never seen such skill. He felt pride that his kingdom had a leader like her. In the middle of the battle, Ethan's unit was pushed back by a heavy charge. For a moment, panic spread. Soldiers stumbled, the line broke, and Ethan found himself cut off. He fought with all his might, but the rival soldiers pressed harder. Just when he thought the line would fall, Claire appeared. She led a group of knights straight into the charge, striking with precision and breaking the enemy's push. Her arrival turned fear into courage. Ethan felt his spirit rise again. He fought harder, his sword moving faster, his steps stronger. Hours passed. The field was littered with broken weapons and wounded men. The sun burned high, but the fighting did not slow. A rival group of soldiers slipped past the lines and charged at her from the side. Ethan saw it happen before anyone else did. His heart leaped. Without thinking, he ran across the field, his body moving faster than his mind. He cut through the enemy soldiers in his way, his sword flashing in the sun. He reached Claire just as the ambush closed in. With all his strength, he stood in front of her, blocking the attack. His blade clashed against theirs, his body taking strikes meant for her. He did not falter. He fought until reinforcements arrived and the danger passed. When the clash ended, Ethan stood, covered in dust and sweat, his breath heavy. Claire looked at him, her eyes sharper than ever, but there was something else in them now. He knew now that his bond with Claire was not only a strange accident of words, it was becoming something forged in the fire of war. And as the sun dipped low, he felt the weight of her eyes on him again, not watching, but relying. Night fell after the long battle. Fires burned across the field, and soldiers tended to the wounded. Ethan sat on the ground, his body aching, his armor marked with scratches. He had given everything he had in the fight, and still his hands shook from the weight of the sword. Around him, men whispered about the ambush he had stopped, about how he had stood in front of the princess without fear. Ethan lowered his head, embarrassed by their words. He had not thought of glory when he acted. He had only thought of protecting her. Claire moved through the camp, checking the wounded, speaking to her officers, and keeping the soldiers steady. She looked tired, yet her posture never bent. When her eyes met Ethan's across the firelight, she paused. For a moment she stood still, then walked toward him. The whispers grew louder, but none dared to step between them. Claire stopped a few feet away, her face unreadable in the flickering light. "You fought well today," she said at last. Her voice was calm, but softer than he had ever heard it before. Ethan bowed his head quickly, unsure how to respond. He wanted to thank her, but his throat was dry. She studied him in silence, then added, "You saved my life." Ethan shook his head. "I only did my duty, princess." Her eyes stayed on him, sharp but steady. "No, you did more than duty. You stood when others would have fallen back. You risked yourself without thought. That is not duty. That is something else." The words struck him harder than the battle itself. No one had ever spoken to him like that. He wanted to explain why he had done it, but he could not find the right words. Claire seemed to sense his struggle, because her expression softened just slightly. She lowered her voice so only he could hear. "When you called me adorable in the throne room, I thought it was foolish. But those words have stayed with me. All my life, men and women have feared me, respected me, but never seen me as more than my title. You spoke to me like I was a person. Do you know what that meant to me?" Ethan's chest tightened. He had never expected such words from her. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, he lowered his eyes and whispered, "I only spoke what I saw." For the first time, he saw a true smile on her face. It was small, but it was real. Claire straightened, her strength returning to her voice. "That is why I have watched you, Ethan. Not because I was angry. Because I wanted to understand the man who could speak such truth without fear." The fire crackled between them, and for a moment the noise of the camp faded. Ethan felt a strange calm, even though his heart pounded. Claire did not turn away from him, and he did not lower his eyes. In that silence, something unspoken passed between them, stronger than any words could carry. The next days brought more battles, but the bond between them grew. Claire began to call on Ethan during meetings, asking his thoughts, though he was not of high rank. Officers looked surprised, but no one questioned her choice. On the field, she rode near him, trusting his blade and his judgment. Soldiers began to whisper not only about her watching him, but about how she relied on him. Ethan felt the weight of her trust, and though he never sought glory, he fought with greater purpose than ever before. One night, after a hard skirmish, Claire asked Ethan to walk with her beyond the camp. The stars were bright, the air cool. They walked in silence until they stood on a hill overlooking the land. Claire's voice broke the quiet. "You changed something in me," she admitted. "You reminded me that even leaders need to be seen for who they are, not only what they are. I do not forget the look in your eyes when you spoke to me. It was not fear, it was truth." Ethan looked at her, his hands tight at his sides. He wanted to answer, but he feared saying too much. Still, he could not stay silent. "And you changed something in me," he said. "Showed me what it means to fight not just for orders, but for someone who believes in you." Their eyes met again, under the stars. This time, there was no weight of fear or doubt, there was only trust. And in that trust, a bond stronger than rank, stronger than battle, began to take root. Ethan did not know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came, he would stand by her side. The final clash came at dawn. The rival forces had gathered all their strength for one last push. The air was heavy with dust, and the ground shook as drums of war echoed across the fields. Ethan stood with his unit, his sword firm in his hand. His body was tired from days of fighting, but his spirit was steady. He glanced toward the front lines where Princess Claire sat on her horse, her figure strong and unyielding. She looked across the field, her eyes sharp with focus. Even from a distance, Ethan felt the strength in her gaze. The horns sounded, and the armies moved. The ground thundered with footsteps as thousands charged forward. Swords clashed, shields broke, and cries filled the air. Ethan fought with all his strength, his blade cutting through the enemy. Around him, soldiers struggled, but he pressed on, his mind clear. He thought of all the moments that had led him here, the slip of words in the throne room, the long days under her watchful eyes, the battles they had faced side by side. Every memory pushed him forward. Claire's orders cut through the chaos, steady and firm. She moved across the field with precision, guiding the soldiers and turning panic into courage. Ethan saw her ride into the thick of the fight, striking with her sword and holding the line. For a moment she seemed untouchable, a force that carried the spirit of the kingdom. But then he saw danger. A group of rival knights had broken through, rushing straight for her. Without thought, Ethan pushed through the crowd, his sword flashing in the sun. He reached her just as the enemy closed in. Together, they fought side by side. Claire's strikes were fast and sharp, while Ethan's strength drove back their foes. For the first time, they moved as one, their blades cutting through the wave of soldiers. The soldiers around them watched in awe as a princess and a common soldier fought together without fear. Their courage spread through the lines, lifting the entire army. The battle raged for hours, but at last, the rival forces began to break. Their lines wavered, their leaders fell, and soon they fled the field. The kingdom's armies raised their swords high in victory, their cheers rolling like thunder across the land. Ethan stood, his chest heaving, his sword heavy in his hand. Claire raised her blade high, her voice strong as she called the victory. The soldiers shouted her name, but many eyes also turned to Ethan. They had seen his bravery, his loyalty, and his bond with their leader. When the dust settled, the court gathered in the capital to honor the victory. The queen sat upon her throne, her eyes proud as she looked upon her daughter and the soldiers who had fought with her. Claire stepped forward, her armor shining, and to the surprise of all, Ethan walked at her side. Murmurs filled the hall, but no one dared to question. The queen listened as Claire spoke of the battle, of the bravery of her men, and of the soldier who had stood by her when no one else could. Her words were clear, and her gaze never left Ethan. After the ceremony, the soldiers and nobles whispered of what they had seen. Some were shocked, some jealous, but most were filled with respect. Ethan had begun as a simple soldier, but he had earned the trust of the princess. Claire did not hide it. She walked with him openly, her eyes on him, not with judgment, but with a quiet pride. The bond between them was no longer rumor. It was real, and it could not be denied. That night, in the quiet of the courtyard, Claire spoke to Ethan alone. "You have given me more than loyalty," she said. "You gave me honesty when no one else dared. You gave me courage when the weight was too heavy. And you gave me something no title or throne could offer, a reason to see myself as more than what the world expects." Ethan lowered his head, his voice steady but humble. "And you gave me purpose. You showed me that even a common soldier can stand for something greater. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and silence stretched between them. It was not the silence of fear or doubt, but the silence of understanding. They stood together, not as princess and soldier, not as general and subordinate, but as two people bound by truth and trust. The war was over, but their story had only begun. In the days that followed, songs were sung of their battles, and stories spread across the kingdom. People spoke of how a single slip of words had sparked a bond stronger than power or rank. And while the court still whispered, the people found hope in the tale of a princess who looked beyond titles and a soldier who spoke with honesty. For in their bond, the kingdom saw a future built not only on duty, but on the courage to speak from the heart.